So, look, these mic sounds. Everything you buy is shit. You know that. Just you fuck up everything you do.
Sorry, everything we buy, I buy.
Yeah.
As head of procurement.
And it's shit. So now we're left with these ridiculous stands. And these
Why
chairs.
are these ridiculous?
And yours is broken.
Are we doing an audio? Is this the podcast? Is
and
the
this
podcast
isn't
or not?
broken. This one isn't broken and it's still shit. Look, see how shit it is. This wouldn't happen if we were working at BPN. Nick Bear. He's in good shape at the moment, isn't he?
Nick Bear is in amazing shape. He's done the correct thing and become a hybrid athlete by hybridizing bodybuilding and running.
He's done what people want to do.
Like, he's just being honest as what people actually want to look like.
I've seen a load of those reels, and I'm sure you've seen them as well, where people are like, back in my day, we used to just call it being fit.
Yeah.
No, nobody
did that.
Nobody was that fit or that strong. Some people were that fit, but not really.
And nobody was that strong.
No one was that strong. People were strong, but there was no one doing running and strength training, and they were that good at either one of those. Like we'd no one like Nick Bear. We had Alex Vida. What's his name? Alex Viada is massive. He was kind of the first person to do that. He was really strong. Yeah. He was pretty open about PEDs from what I remember. He's still active as well. A super intelligent guy. Yeah. And he was kind of the first of those people, but outside the pro athlete realm, nobody was doing that.
No, and even pro athletes looked so different. Nobody looked like nobody was in that condition. Nobody had that much muscle mass. If they had that much muscle mass, they were gigantic. Like, I'm thinking of the thrower in the Balco documentary. Who was like, call me Mr. Zing. He's like 140 kilos.
Yeah.
Like,
but he's not running ultramarathons.
No. But he has massive amounts of muscle mass. But nobody did both.
This isn't new. Like most things, this is new. So most things in the fitness industry are somewhat coming in a circle sometimes, you know. But this definitely isn't new. We've been involved now for, I'd say, about 16 years. Mm-hmm. About the same for you probably. This isn't something that's happening before. People did want to be fit before. Like when CrossFit was kind of taking off, there was this alternate to CrossFit where it was kind of warrior training is what people call it. People are doing like Tough Mudders. It was kind of like circuit training that boxers might do.
I think it was circuit training, but instead of wearing Lycra and doing box step-ups, you were doing the most explosive and crazy-looking movements you could think of.
Which are homemade sandbags. Yeah. Kegs. I used to have a keg. It's actually illegal. You're not supposed to own a keg. Do you know that? All kegs are a property of a brewer. So...
What?
Yeah.
I have
not
kegs.
Illegal, but you've stolen property. Like
I have kegs that were brought by the plasterer to my parents' old house to stand on instead of trestles when they were plastering.
Everyone does, but all kegs were at least at some point were the properties of brewers, you know. So
really,
because they'd send them back, you know. So if you had a keg, it was probably stolen. Maybe it was defunct and was thrown out. But
what happens if you had kegs for taps in your shed during COVID?
Well, that was definitely illegal. So the muscle mass thing is really interesting as well because people just don't appreciate that most of the athletes don't even look that good. So if you look like Nick Bear, or Jesus, even we were just looking at Chris Williamson there, we were on RP Strengths, and they were talking about making him give me a fuckboy physique, you know, and
he has it.
He's in incredible shape, But we're very lucky to work with a big spectrum of athletes. Yeah, some of them are on the spectrum, but there's a lot of those athletes.
Spectrum in capital letters there.
A lot of them are in, not a lot of them. Quite a few of them are on PEDs, the elite level. Most of our athletes we work on aren't on PEDs. Yeah. Most people don't look as good as Instagram might think.
No.
Would. Not without a serious amount of diligence.
But even international level athletes.
International.
Like you look at pro rugby players, even on non-international stage, right? Loads of training. Mm-hmm. Loads of training which would put you in great shape. Loads of conditioning.
Yeah, go on.
What are you guys?
Go on, what else? Go on.
So they're in
loads of else. And what else?
So loads of lifting weights
and
loads of conditioning work.
Go on, and what else?
Really well refined diets with dietitians,
and
they're in a really good position to be in great shape because of those three things.
Loads of what as well?
I am not sure what you're referring to.
Loads of PEDs.
Loads of PEDs as well, right? But most of the time, pro rugby players don't look anything like that. Like even guys who aren't. So let's say, right. Front rows are massive. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, unless you're Max Lahif, you're not in amazing shape.
No.
Like you're still in really good shape. You're unbelievably fit, but you don't look like Nick Bear.
No.
Even then, when you go out into the backs and into the centres, guys who are 95 to 100 kilos, really fit, very low body fat percentage, they still don't look like Nick Bear because they probably shouldn't. Because that body fat percentage is probably a bit too low. They're probably opening themselves up to a risk of injury or lack of recovery that would come along with restricted calories in your diet. But then it's just kind of expected if you're on Instagram and you're doing training, like that guy Jack D Fitness, the guy who did the 5-minute mile of 500 pound squat. Was that last year or
I'm
earlier?
not sure.
Anyway, unbelievable athlete, triathlete, lifts big weights as well. He's in amazing shape, but it's not that common.
It's really not that common, and I wish people would get more of an idea of it. Like, we're lucky enough to see lots of athletes all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And lots of them are recreational athletes, some of them are professional athletes, some of them are trying to go pro. Like, if you look at the international rugby teams outside of South Africa, who look ridiculous, and there's, you know, most other teams don't look that good.
No, and you have outliers, and those outliers are known.
Yeah, there's like
You'll
one
be
in
like,
the team.
oh my God, just see the shape he's in, you know? But it's well known, like they're the outlier on that team or the outlier in that area, and they're known like the Max Lahif, right?
Yeah. Well,
is that how you pronounce his second name?
Lahif, I think so, yeah.
I hope so. I'm making a fool of myself with that. But he's known for being in amazing shape. But there's 50 other players on that squad that don't look like that.
The thing as well, if you go to like provincial rugby, or like always provincial rugby players, people are never moving up, you'll actually see that they'll generally look a little bit better. Now, there might be reasons for that.
Yes.
People are never going to international teams, or rather they're playing internationally but they're not on national teams. A lot of times those clubs look a little bit better. Like if you were to go to maybe not Australia anymore, but if
some
you were
of
to
the
look at
second string teams in France will have players who are in incredible nick, and there are different reasons behind that or whatever, you know.
And if you go to South African, I think they've like
if you go to South African secondary school level teams.
We actually know someone who did their work placement for sports science in South Africa for a bit, and he said they had like teenagers, there was something like deadlifting, I think it was like 270 kilos, squatting massive weights. But there's also stories like that of the Irish rugby team and certain players back in the DAY.
Yeah, back in the glory days. And to be honest, the Irish thing is, so obviously, right, this is going to sound a bit cloak and daggerish, but those Irish players are stronger and bigger and in better shape now than they ever have been. Like the secondary school players. Like everybody is getting bigger, everybody's getting stronger, which obviously they need. Like they need to be in that kind of shape if they want to be international players. If you're in Leinster and you want to play for Leinster, you have to be in unbelievable physical condition besides your rugby playing ability. Like you still, there's obviously, you could be a gifted player, you can be a Ringrose, or you could be a Brian O'Driscoll, who are unbelievable as underage players, but you still have to be physically, like you have to have that prowess around you just to even get noticed. Like
if you look at someone like, say, Chris Williamson again there, or like Max Lahif is too far at the realms of what's achievable for most people, but I think Chris is a good example. I'm blanking in anyone else who's in incredible shape or great shape, but you have to dedicate yourself purely to aesthetics if you want to look like that. Yeah, and I think that's the lie a lot of people will tell themselves is they'll do a lot of sprint training maybe, or they'll do a load of really explosive training, and it's great. Like there's all those feelings of moving your body through space, being explosive, being able to sprint up the stairs or whatever it is. That feels good. Like that does make a difference to your everyday life. That's probably not the best way of getting the Nick Bear physique. Or like Blaine is a great example. Blaine McConnell. Yeah. Like incredible shape, but he had a photo up of him when he was, I think he was like 15, and he was already ripped, like had visible abs. Now, that's not super uncommon. Like teenagers, I had abs when I was a teenager. Most people I know did, because we played lots of sports. It's big culture in Ireland for teenagers to play sports. It's actually, we were in Switzerland a few weeks ago for a seminar, and one of the head coaches actually been playing rugby in Ireland for like a year during university, and he was like, couldn't get over how many teenagers in Ireland are involved in sport. And it's one thing I definitely think is great about the culture in Ireland is like, no matter what sport you're involved in, there's a good chance you're playing some kind of team sport, and it's a point of contention with some people, and some people are very egregious about it, and maybe that's a fair grievance, like that some of those people who didn't play sports felt like they were ostracized. So in communities, But a lot of people play sport until they're teenagers. Now, lots of those lads drop off when they hit their 20s,
Definitely, yeah.
which is a shame, but it's still better than not having it the other way.
Oh, absolutely. And I think just doing more sport younger is better.
Yeah.
You know, if you drop out, obviously the big problem is female athletes dropping out of sport at like 14, 15. Massive drop off in numbers. And that's getting a bit better. But I think for generally speaking, forcing kids to play sport when they're younger is better.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be forcing people to play sports. You want to be encouraging people.
I think a big problem for our generation in Ireland was you had GAA soccer, or some places had rugby, and you didn't really have a massive amount else besides that, you know, like, so it just so happened if you weren't that mic stand is under pressure. You might just have to rest it against your knee.
I think that would be a terrible idea.
So I think that's getting better. I think there's more access to more broad scope of sports. You know, rock climbing. Did you know anybody who was a rock climber? No, of course not. Or the same with weightlifting, you know. Mm-hmm. Those opportunities just weren't available to you. Whereas we know loads of people now who maybe their parents were training in a CrossFit gym and they started training there, and now they do weightlifting or whatever they do. And it just becomes a much smoother pathway into sport and like physical activity than if you were just playing GAA or soccer or rugby.
I think if you look at the athletics as well for Ireland, especially in the female side, they've done a lot better. And they're about probably some of them maybe like 6, 7, 8 years younger than us, and they're kind of reaping the change in that, you know. So things change a lot every generation. So be interesting to see what's there for my son when he's a bit older. He started playing soccer actually recently.
Did he?
Yeah, little kickers thing. It's like an underage, like for up until 2.5 or whatever. So it gets in there early. I think people are more conscious of it.
I think as well, people are aware, it's not necessarily that like the parent will be aware, but the people who are running those sports clubs are aware how important physical literacy early in life is.
Yeah, he's very physically literate.
Like you'll see toddlers and you like throw them a ball and they'll like boom, and be able to catch it, you know, or they'll like be able to move their body to get in front of the ball. And then you'll see kids who've just never been exposed to that. And then suddenly they're 10 or 11 or 12 and they want to start playing sports, but they just don't have that vocabulary in their head. They just can't do it.
It is always interesting. I never really took much notice of this before, but say if you go places, maybe like the beach, or you go to things like that, so that's an adult involved sport. So obviously you don't let your toddler just run around
the
they're
beach.
They're not going to be playing the soccer game by themselves or whatever. It's called soccer in Ireland because we have a different sport called football, and if that irritates you
to be honest, if it irritates you, it kind of makes me happy.
I hope it irritates you. Yeah,
I hope it grates you.
Yeah, there's also a sport called handball in Ireland, which is different to European handball, but that's beside the point. No one knows about either of those sports.
Handball in Ireland is like squash without rackets.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But the general shape of parents is somewhat disappointing. I don't want to say, and I'm not disappointed for them as an individual. I'm not comparing them to themselves or anything like that, but I am just kind of disappointed for them, or I would wish better for them. You know, the standard is pretty low, and I'm not talking about everyone should be looking like Max Laheath, just to piggyback off the situation for how hard it is to get into that shape. But it is unfortunate for those kids, because you'll see them bringing them to that sport or something like that. You know, the kids will be really active, and the kids will be in great shape from, you know, preteen or whatever, and that's really great to see. But it is, for the parents, you'd really like to give them the opportunity to show them what it'd be like if you're in better shape. And again, it's not like you have to be like Blaine or Max or Nick Bear or Chris Williamson. You don't have to look like those people, but not being obese would be better for everyone, especially for your kids and for yourself as well, you know. So I'm not saying it just from a point of view where I'm like, everyone needs to carry the boats, Goggins kind of thing. We all, you know, I see those, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this one fella, he gets up at 2 a.m. and he's got this supplement line called like 50 cal or something, and everyone's like, why are you getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning? You know, you don't have to be doing things like that, but you will see, you know, people being like, I don't have time to train. Like, you do have time to train. And like, I do. Before I had kids, I would have never really said anything like that, but now as a parent, I'm like, no, you've time, you're just being fucking lazy. I would have thought that before, but until I was in that situation, I reserved judgment. But now I'm like, no, you do.
I think it's just whatever you prioritize.
Yeah.
You know, if someone doesn't really see it as being that valuable for them, it's very hard then to sacrifice whatever hour of their day, you know.
Yeah, but most of your day, like kids, you're very busy with kids. But when
Yeah.
they're gone to sleep, once you've cleaned up and done the washing, whatever, you still
Yeah.
have more time, and you can still go to bed early. You know, it's
Yes.
I see it a lot with. There's like specific dad influencers that I get now at the moment. I don't know if you get them, where
I
they're
don't
like
get them.
teaching busy dads how to train.
Okay.
And you're like, lads, is it really that different? Are we really looking at just reducing the length of a training session to be more effective? Do we really need a specialist for this now?
Yeah.
You're pandering to a marketplace, I think, to be honest.
Because there is places you need specialists for like postpartum care.
Like, we never get involved in that.
No.
Loads of those emails.
Rehab of specific injuries. You need specialists for those.
Specialist care.
You probably don't need a specialist for you're a small bit busier. How are you going to train around that?
Yeah, I don't. It kind of annoys me. And then I see the comments and I see people being like, oh, this guy's so unrealistic and a different influencer because you don't know what it's like to train with kids. And they're like, you're just being a fucking loser, you know?
Yes.
On the same vein of piggybacking off of how hard it is to look great like that. I totally agree with that. But at the same time, you do have to come away from the other end of the spectrum and be like, get the fuck over yourself, like, and go training. Like, you just need to be, again, you don't have to be you don't have to be 10% with visible abs.
No.
But you do need to be something, and you do have time. Like, stop watching Netflix, go to bed on time. Like, you have to accept that some things you should be doing, or accept the repercussions of those.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the funny thing as well is, so obviously we're dealing with athletes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not dealing with athletes, we're looking at athletes training and maybe making videos about them, or we're looking at training with athletes or refining programs and stuff like that. And we have this idea. So we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago. Like, oh yeah, it'll be great to be in better shape or whatever, or like, this is what we're moving towards, or this is what I'm training for. But then you look around, if you're in a normal group of people and you're like, geez, yeah, I am in better shape than nearly everyone here.
I was thinking on the lead up to 300, I remember the year before, a good friend Rob was saying, he's like, it'd be great to show people that you could hit that massive PB.
Yes.
Not only relative to yourself, but a mass PB relative to everyone else while having a kid, you know, because he obviously owns a very large gym, very successful gym, and has done for years. And he sees every excuse on the daily from people, you know, less than we would see them. Mm-hmm. I think our particular cohort of people, though, are much less likely to be in a position where they're making excuses for themselves. Yeah. I think any viewers or app users or programmers or clients are probably on the other end of the spectrum of super driven in regards to their goals. But he sees things where it's like, oh, I could make a training today for the hour because whatever, so-and-so, you know, blaming kids or career or something, you know. But he was always like, it'd be great to show people that you can do stuff like that while having kids, you know. Yeah. And that was definitely something I thought about a lot while I was doing it. I never doubted it. I remember people are always like, what are you going to do with training? You have a kid. I'm like, keep training. What the fuck do you think I'm going to do?
The training center is 50 feet from your kid's bedroom.
But I built that because I planned ahead, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the reasons, I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but one of the reasons Sika Strength was knowing that we wanted more freedom in our own lives, and that was part of my thought process years ago, you know. And I don't expect people to be changing their whole career for stuff like that, but that's kind of how you have to start thinking about things if you want something.
Definitely. And if you want something at a certain level, you know, like most people are happy to go hunting if they're a hunter once every couple of weeks or 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. If you want to shoot 3 or 4 or like 2 or 3 times a week every week for the 6 months, or in this case 9 months, you have to change things. Yeah. Like, you have to be able to manipulate your schedule. You have to be able to have control over those things. And the same with training. Like, if you want to be able to train as much at a certain level, you have to be able to manipulate those things. Like, you can't be working a standard 9 to 5 with an hour commute on both sides. Yeah. Like, it just, you can do it, but you won't be able to do anything else in your life, you know? Yeah, it is. It does apply to everything, really. It's not just training, but I suppose in regards to the podcast or whatever we're talking about here, that's the most specific one. Talking about general training and how life might affect it, what I really wanted to do is before and after pictures for Renovation. Oh my God. I'd love to have an MRI scan of my hand, because my hands are definitely 50% thicker and heavier than they were 4 weeks ago. How does almost kidney failure affect training, do you think? In the way where you stop training, it probably affects it massively. Yeah. So I actually don't know. The long tail of that is pretty long, I would say. Yeah. Also, the psychological long tail of it is like, I could die again. Well, it's so unlikely. Probably. Like, the asbestos damage to my lungs is probably going to kill me soon. It's not confirmed if it's asbestos. But yeah, doing loads of physical work, like removing the walls, removing the chimney, taking the roof off, re-roofing the shed, digging the holes for posts and stuff. That kind of physical work is great because I feel like you get all the physical training, you get all the massive amounts of muscle fatigue that comes along with that, but you also get calorie restriction because you don't usually eat while you're doing it. And then you get the added advantage of it just being for so long. Like you're never, if you're in the gym doing like deadlifts, you're never going to be doing farmer's carries for 2.5 hours. The other massive negative of that kind of work though is you tend to just hurt yourself in certain ways, and then you'll end up only lifting something with your right arm for 6 hours versus your left hand because you smashed your left hand with a sledgehammer.
Asbestos was an insulator, was it? Was that the whole idea? A non-flammable insulator?
I think it was non-flammable. It made concrete hard. It was the perfect substance. It made concrete harder. It stopped everything going on fire. And you just added a few spoonfuls into your little mix, you know?
They were making a plastic concrete mix there. I think some people are still trying to work on it. So recycled plastic or old plastic in with concrete. Obviously, plastic lasts forever, which is one of the great things, but also one of the terrible things about plastic is that it lasts for, in relation to human life, way longer. So they were trying to mix it in with concrete or make most of it from plastic and concrete or varying degrees of that. I don't know if it ever worked out or they're still working on it, but it is it's definitely something.
Speaking of reusing plastic, Bruno, our Brazilian buddy, who's just an absolutely gifted technician with his hands. No matter what he needs to fix or make, he'll do it. So he was helping me out yesterday chasing some walls. There's no connector from...
Where were they going?
So he's making a connector going from like a big industrial vacuum, which is like 5 foot tall, onto the chaser unit, which is a double angle grinder basically that cuts into the wall. So he got a plastic bottle, got my brazing torch from the shed, melted down the plastic bottle and set it over a form, then used that as his like mold, and then molded a plastic fitting to go from the vacuum onto the chaser unit.
Brazilians are some unsung heroes of work.
Lads, I've never seen anything like it.
The Irish have a good reputation abroad. Also a terrible reputation, but also a good reputation for working.
Good reputation for working, terrible reputation for...
socialising.
Yeah.
And both are fair, I would say, to be honest.
I'd say both are well deserved. They worked hard to get both of them.
Yeah. The other could be a bit better, but that's individual choices. Not as bad as some cultures, to be fair. So
No. But and as well, like, someone has to build the bridges, like. So
after doing jiu-jitsu for several years now, I've come to see the Brazilians are somewhat similar to Irish people, but they're drastically different. So in the work end of things, they are troopers.
Yeah.
Love working and getting stuff done. On the other side there, so if you look at Irish people and they're socialising and stuff abroad and that kind of bad name, you know, maybe if you go to Australia, for example, I know there's a lot of Australians listening, don't have a great reputation, and I would agree with the Australians, for example. I'm not going to defend any Irish people for that, but we're also weirdly introverted and insular, somewhat moody, dour, sarcastic at home. So in certain cultures, it's probably gotten a bit more like this as years have gone on. Maybe our parents' generation would have been a bit more capable of enticing people to come to their home and do stuff, you know. Whereas this...
My God. It's just one phone call after the other today.
That's every day.
Strangely, you got a phone call today.
So, whereas now people are a little bit more individualized a small bit. Yeah. And whereas, like, our jiu-jitsu coach will be like, come over for a barbecue, like, now. And you'll be like, you were trying to think of a reason to say no for no reason.
For
like,
no reason at all.
You'd want to go over.
Yeah.
Like, he's a good friend of ours.
Yeah.
But your brain will be like, but
you'll feel like it's almost the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Like, you'll feel like, oh no, I'm imposing on them now and going, like, I shouldn't be going here. I need to go home.
But he knows that. So he's like, no, you're going now. I'll meet you there now. He doesn't say, do you want to come over? He's like, come up there now.
Yeah. He'll already have the fire lit, like.
And there'll be, like, sometimes the other Brazilians will come over, but they'll come over and they're like, if they've already cooked food, it's sharing, it's really nice. And obviously it's very enjoyable when you go, but it's a part of you is like, oh, I shouldn't be going. I'm imposing. I have stuff to do. I can't go over there.
I think that was almost beat into us, though.
Yeah.
By our parents.
Massively.
Like, if you were over hanging out at your friend's house and it was like 5 o'clock or whatever and you had dinner there and you came home, like, I can't believe you had dinner there.
Yeah, you were eating their food.
Yeah, literally, like, you're taking stuff away from them.
That actually made me think of something. So Christianity is kind of on the rise again in certain cultures among younger people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have any opinion on it in terms
Not
of
in Ireland.
No, that's what I wanted to talk about.
I think in the US it is.
So in the US, it seems to be younger generation. I know there's a lot of US people listen to our videos, and I don't know what your denomination or inclination towards that is. In Ireland, though, that is something that won't happen.
No.
So really brief history of Ireland is colonization for approximately 800 years, a little bit less depending on what way you look at it and who you're looking at, who colonized. But eventually, it's about 800 years. 1922, we essentially freed from the British, and then we were left with individual rule, left the Commonwealth in like 1949. So we've been just over 100 years. One very long lifetime for some people, centenarians.
Yeah.
My grandmother would have been alive during the War for Independence. I think she was born. She would have been alive during World War II, absolutely. There was not a long period of time there where there was a power vacuum, and the Irish government were actually doing a great job economically with what was given to them at the time. But there was a cultural power vacuum because our culture had been eradicated, basically. It was illegal speaking Irish or for hundreds of years, was often punishable by death, certainly some form of public punishment. The way we dressed, our haircuts and stuff were really prosecuted, and so there was this removal of the culture, and Catholicism was getting a lot bigger. And then eventually, when the Brits were removed, Catholicism kind of came in and essentially occupied that power vacuum and assumed a lot of the very strict nature of the Catholic Church. Like contraception was illegal, babies out of wedlock was illegal, right up until the late 80s, and we have some older siblings who would have been teens, pre-teens around that time, and they're some of the most vehement anti-religious people you'll ever see, because they saw a lot more than us. So people born in the 90s would have been at the tail end of this thing by the time we got to awareness as an adult or awareness as a human being, kind of around 10 maybe. You would have lost some of it, but some of that culture would still have been in there. But the stories, the child abuse, the issues with mothers having kids out of wedlock, there's quite literally mass graves of babies and mothers, still ongoing to this day. A lot of that stuff is like massively horrific, and it's definitely not something that's going to make a resurgence in Ireland unless people aren't paying attention to history. No,
I don't think. And it's a strange one as well, because everybody down here is Catholic.
Yeah.
Like, we're all
culturally, but not religiously.
Sorry, yeah. Catholic by name, basically. So, like, everybody or most people will still have their kids baptized, or a lot of people will have their kids baptized, mainly for a thing of getting into, like, local schools and stuff. Most people will do their communion and confirmation in school, and then I'd say it's probably like 50-50 at the moment for who gets married in a church and who doesn't. Maybe skewing even further where less people get married in the church now. But that's still like a kind of part of Irish culture, is the Catholicism. But I would say I know one person who I'm friends with who would be a practicing Catholic now.
Some of our parents' generation and older would still be practicing Catholics, but not a huge amount.
Yeah, I'm talking about like our friends.
Who
would be. Like, there's one person I can think of who would be, but besides that, I can't think of anyone else.
The thing that made me think about it is that there's comments on any social media of people being like, Jesus first, all this stuff, just anything. Like, it could be a lifting video. If lifting video goes big enough, people just make those comments. I don't know if they're bots, I don't know if they write them. They seem to be individual profiles.
Yeah.
There'll be videos on. I was kind of thinking about this because Max Tuning, he's a podcast, Don't Be Sour. Yeah. Just listened to that one day, and he was on someone else's podcast on about a coming to God moment, and loads of comments there, and it's really there. It's really interesting. It's changing culture. I don't really have any opinions on it. My opinion is I don't think it'll make a resurgence here in Ireland, and for a good reason.
Not. No,
but it is certainly interesting.
I think Irish people are getting more spiritual. Certainly a certain cohort of people, a lot of...
We haven't had a long time, to be honest. Like,
No. But I'd say like some spirituality will come back into the population at some point. But at the moment, it's definitely very, very. Is it called agnostic?
Yeah.
Very agnostic.
Yeah, like I suppose when you think about it, if you think in 100 years to develop a different style of culture, which we've lost some of that sense in terms of community, but then if you look, say, since the 80s, so like 30 years to develop a new culture, things move pretty fast in the grand scheme of things, but very slow in terms of looking at them, you know?
Yeah.
So...
Like, I'd say gym plus coffee have more people in the Catholic Church.
That's an Irish brand that has like Gym Plus Coffee on their brand, you know. They make nice stuff by
Make lovely hoodies.
I don't have any of their stuff, but they're very, very popular. They definitely have more people in the Catholic Church.
It's a very you'd see a lot of people at farmers markets on Saturday mornings after doing their F45 class or their local CrossFit class. They'll be wearing a Gym Plus Coffee hoodie while getting like a flat white or maybe an oat milk latte.
I do want to say, because I know there's probably some people listening who are very Christian or practicing Christians. It's not a comment on Christianity.
Not at all.
Before you go to town on us.
No. This is a comment on
our culture.
And that time in Irish history when things were massively, massively catastrophic.
Things are much better now. And people yearn for like the old days, and people are like, the Industrial Revolution was the worst thing for the human race. And they're like, I will hold on a bit. Hold on a while.
Hold on now.
Hold on a minute.
No.
Things are changing pretty fast, you know. Obviously,
I think things are great now. I think things in 2019 were great.
For Owen and Dara, if we were 31 years old, well, you're 31, I'll be 31 soon, in 1950...
Oh my God.
Things would not have been very good.
No, not at all. Things would have been incredibly hard.
Yeah.
We certainly wouldn't have...
Go back to 1850.
Stop it, yeah.
Things would have been fucking terrible.
No, you would have been working in a tin mine in West Cork.
No, we probably would have been gone in 1850. When was the famine? 1847?
1847, yeah. So you'd either be dead or out of the country.
There's a bigger chance we'd be dead, I think.
Yes.
We're the only country in Europe with a population that is smaller than in the 1850s, something that hasn't...
It's just getting back up around there now, isn't it?
No, it was like 7 or 8 million.
Was it 7 million?
We probably won't get that. So our reproduction rate is one of the higher ones in Europe, but it's still not enough. I think we're like 1.1. I think you need, someone can correct me on this if you're listening, it's something like 1.8 to 2, I think, for the reproduction rate.
Okay.
To be sufficient.
Yeah.
Everyone's obviously heard about South Korea has the biggest impending population collapse, so their population is going like this, basically.
I hadn't heard about that until you brought it up to me.
I've heard a lot of places. I actually try not to pay too much attention to this stuff, but sometimes the people I watch or listen to.
Yeah.
Actually, we were talking about this recently. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts or videos that much anymore. I've just mostly audiobooks.
I keep going over my audiobook allowance on Spotify Premium, though.
It's very low.
It's very low. Like 2 books and you're done.
Audible is a tenner a month.
Okay.
And I think you get 1 credit. I think you can pay more, like 15 a month, you get 2 credits or something, and that just gets you any book you want, basically.
Yes.
Now, there's a sneaky thing you can do in Audible where you can return a book and you get your credits back. And
you do not.
The Amazon just don't care. Like, I don't do that because I just end up with the same one every month. I end up by the time I finish a book or whatever.
Is it unlimited? The amount of books you can have in a month, or how many tokens? Like how many tokens?
I think you get 1 with the base subscription.
Okay.
I'm sure there's an unlimited subscription. Maybe. I was listening to Scott Galloway's Wealth one. It's pretty interesting. Basically, it's just investing. Investing in Ireland, unfortunately, is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
It's worth doing for sure, but it is... I think, actually, that's a really interesting thing about changing in times, is you can invest yourself now as an individual. If you pay some amount of attention, you can do it perfectly well.
Yeah.
Before, it would have been like you'd have to go to a broker, you'd have to go to a bank, assuming you had any money. But the availability of online technology makes it so much easier.
Yes.
He's a great way of putting it. He's like, you're never going to beat the market. So he's on about diversifying, you know?
Yes.
But the way he phrased it was really interesting. It was like, you're not going to beat the human race for productivity. You're like, if you're index funds, ETFs, stuff like that, which are big conglomerates, you know, or you're investing in the Fortune 500s or something like that, like, you're not going to outpace the most successful global corporations. Like, you're probably... It's unlikely you're going to find a really interesting novel one.
Yeah.
Remember, I had more time, I could read more of the paper when I was working in pharmaceutical. I found a really good one, which was a company in Netherlands that recycled lithium batteries for electric cars. And they blew up. It was so interesting. It was the most... it it was the most novel increase in an investment I had outside of some cryptocurrencies, you know.
Yes.
But this one is so interesting because I was like, that's definitely going to be good, because I was like 2017.
Yeah.
By like 2020, it had gone up by like 200% or something.
My God.
No, I hadn't put that much into it, obviously, like a very token amount, but it was quite novel to see that. But in general, like, you're not going to beat the biggest corporations which control everything probably.
No, like Pepsi and Coke probably have things going pretty well for them.
Some people put so much money into Coke because you get like specific dividends, you know. But if you put a lot of money, you get a reasonable amount. It's very interesting. There's a style of lifestyle called FIRE. Basically, it's like early retirement.
FIRE.
I don't know what it stands for. It's an acronym, so it's FIRE for something. I don't know what it's like financial independence retirement something.
Okay.
Where they basically want to retire by 40.
That'd be sick.
Now, the problem with that is they're really high earning individuals most of the time.
Yeah.
Are smart investments.
Yeah.
Or if you're not, you live frugally.
But the other thing is if you make twice as much money as someone else, then you can live the same way as them for twice as long if you work for half the length of time.
Saving your way to money is not the way, I've discovered. I just don't think that's...
I'm glad you discovered that. I've never tried.
You cannot. You can save your way to a nice little parachute, I think.
Yes.
But you can't save your way to wealth.
Yeah.
You need success and smart choices, I think.
Yeah,
and
really do.
You need to earn more money and make your money do stuff, really. Now, I'm not saying we've any wealth right now, but
God,
I've tried the first half, saving your way to it, it doesn't. To be honest, unfortunately, we just go places a lot. Either like, well, Sika pays for stuff because they're expensive, you know, but like me and my family, like, we just like going places.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the amount of money I've spent. I tried thinking about it there in one day that I've spent on travel and stuff, and it's not in 6 digits, but it's probably halfway
it's
there.
Better off never ever thinking about that.
I don't regret it at all. Absolutely not. I do it all over again.
I did a terrible thing last year and added up a cursory glance at financial investment in hunting.
Oh no, don't do that.
That was
a real shock for you.
That was a big shock.
That was a lot of money.
That was a lot of money, yeah.
A deposit for a house kind of money.
More than a deposit for a house.
You spend a lot of money if you don't think about it.
Yeah, and especially, do you know when you spend more money? It's when you're really thinking about the things you're buying, and then you just buy the best one you can buy. That's the ultimate money hole.
I'm like, earning more money to a certain extent is definitely better. A lot of studies on happiness, money is a huge thing financially. Yes. You're less likely to get divorce if you earn more money. Yeah. Now there's cultural stuff like that, and that marriage is becoming a bit of a luxury. Basically, for some people, maybe not so much in Ireland. A lot of people still get married in Ireland.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'd hate to be trying to date, whatever you want to call it now.
I listened to, you know that thing that happens when you're listening to a podcast and the next one in the series just comes on? So I was listening to somebody on Chris Williamson, and Brett Cooper on Chris Williamson came up. She's like a kind of right-wing...
Who?
Brett Cooper.
That name sounds really familiar.
She's, you definitely recognize her. She's kind of like a right-wing... social commenter.
I thought that name sounds so familiar. Go on, Annie.
But she was basically talking about. So I think she's a podcast called The Comment Section, and she basically finds stuff on TikTok and Instagram and comments on them in like with a right wing twist on it, kind of. But she was talking about that thing of. Actually, she was talking about religious revival in the States and how it's like becoming a big thing. But it's funny, the American context on it is definitely very different from the Irish, like in terms of marriage, in terms of all that stuff. It's just obviously different culture, different way of thinking about things. Like getting married at 23 in the States really isn't that outside of the norm.
I think one thing in that regard, if anyone's thinking about having kids, I think you should, as soon as you're ready to have kids financially and emotionally, you should have them sooner rather than later. Okay. Now I'm not talking about from a biological perspective. Yes. Which probably is better. Yeah. If you look at it in some ways. But in terms of yourself, you're just probably going to enjoy it more, get more energy. I'm not saying it's wrong to have kids whenever time. Yeah. But if you do want to have kids and you financially think you can have them and you think you're ready, because you'll never really know, I suppose, which is the big gamble, but definitely I had my son when I was 28. Okay. And that's a fucking great age. Looking at it now, to be honest. I was also thinking last night when I was training, I was thinking about all the opportunities the barbell has given me, like wife, family, career, like a lifestyle that would never be able to not afford, but I wouldn't have the time. If like, should I continued in pharmaceutical, maybe I would have done very well financially after 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
Never would have the time I have now or the engagement in my life.
Or the opportunity to travel and meet people either.
I'd do anything.
Yeah.
It's a funny one, actually. I see a lot as well, people saying they won't have kids because of travel and stuff. And as much as we talked about travel being great, it does get kind of old after a while. No one really mentioned that enough.
We do like spurts of travel, I'd say, where we tend to do like 4 or 5 trips in a row. And after that, I'm always like, okay, seminars and stuff are over for a while. We're booked out for a short while.
Like, I think I'll hit about 6 trips this year, most years, something like that. And I know it's a really privileged thing to be saying, but I'd be very fortunate the circumstances I'm in. But don't not have kids because you want to go on a few holidays. It's not the same thing, lads. It's not. No. I see this online. People like, none of my stuff gets broken, and you're like, things don't mean that much, lads. Like traveling is nice, but it's not that nice. A few holidays. You can travel with your kids. You can go places. Wait till they're older and go then.
Having done September before last to the September previous to that, I did 32 flights in 12 months. And I'm telling you now, anything is better than that.
Like, people, if the reason you're not having kids is because you want to buy nice things and travel,
I think that's a different thing. I think that's the reason that their brain tells them.
Oh, okay. Why do you think that? What do you think is going on there?
Obviously, it's like a big daunting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there's things we don't want to do, like if I don't want to go train, I'll just be like, Gareth, I'm afraid I'm going to die. Like,
yeah.
And then I'll just put that excuse in it where maybe I'm just being lazy and don't want to go and train,
Yeah.
Or maybe I just have a different priority going on right now. And I think everybody does that. Like every single person does that, and we're not aware of it when we do it. And I think especially when it comes down to massive things like kids or whatever, you'll put an arbitrary reason on it, like, no, I like my stuff to be in a certain way, or I like the freedom to be able to just leave and go wherever. But there's probably other things going on there as well, just besides that one reason.
Oh, that's fair. I'd actually never really thought about that too much, because it always seemed really superficial, because you see it a lot, and like I try not to see it too much. I try to pay less attention to it, but you'll get those Instagram reels where it's like child-free life at 40 or 35 or something.
Yeah.
They're just showing going on holidays, and in my head I'm like, these aren't equivalent things. Like, they are not. Like, I'm not saying everyone should have kids. I don't think like that at all. But I don't think that's their equivalent decisions. Like, you shouldn't have kids because you don't want to have kids, not because you want to have nice things.
I think as well, that's just a difficult thing to admit to yourself.
Yes.
And especially if you're like talking to other people about it or putting it out on social media, I think that's a difficult thing. And I'd say for a lot of people, like if your social media is big enough and you start saying things like that, you'll get the people hitting back at you, Whereas it's a lot easier to be like, no, this is the reason why.
Or I'll see stuff where it's like, I got it for a few of them for a while, where it's like people playing video games. And it was like the husband and wife playing video games, or the boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. Right. And like, that's... First of all, you can also play video games after you go to bed if you want, but that's a crazy comparison to compare having the best relationship you can have with anyone in your whole life.
Yes.
Or playing video games. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing to me if that's the actual reason people think about.
Yeah, there's surely something else going on there.
It has to be.
Yeah. I know, like I'll see it in myself where I'll make excuses about things, and I know like the problem that comes along with this is once that kind of rhetoric starts, you just buy into it, or you bite on harder and harder. You're like, no, this is the reason. And then someone will question it. You're like, no, this is the reason.
Yeah.
And you're not even aware of that bias in your head. But you just keep biting down more, and then it just becomes harder and harder to leave go of that.
Do you know who I blame a lot, actually, is a lot of parents where the default is they're really negative about having kids. So then a lot of people assume when you never have kids that it's terrible having kids.
Okay.
It's so strange. So, like, when your partner is pregnant, or if you're pregnant, depend to growing percentage of females who listen to the YouTube.
Yes.
If at some point you're pregnant, you'll find maybe, I'm not sure in your culture, but certainly in our culture, people will be really like passively aggressively negative towards the future baby. Yeah, they'll be like, "Enjoy it now, well, lass."
I've actually been with you while people have said that to you.
Really irritates me. It was really irritating at the time because it was always coming from people who had kids, you know.
Yes.
There's people who had multiple kids. It's not like people had one kid and stopped and they were like, "Nope, it definitely isn't for me." You'd have people who'd have like a cohort of kids. They'd have a five-a-side football team. They have a cartel of kids. And they were saying, "Enjoy it now, well, last." You're like, why did you keep going if it's that bad?
Yeah.
Like, stop using that language. Like, stop using that rhetoric. Like, that's not good for people who don't have kids.
I actually look like Stephen Ranella has a great way of talking about. So he gave up drinking, and he was like, because he just couldn't handle the next morning if he was hungover and he'd have to look after kids.
That's impossible.
And he was like, he had a great way of saying it. He was like, those kids did not ask to be born and live in this house.
Yes.
He was like, that was 100% my decision. It's like, they didn't arrive at my door and be like, "Hey, Steve, we're going to live here." He was like, it was a conscious decision that this is going to happen and they're going to live with us and they're here morning, evening and night.
Yeah.
So I have to be the person who does that, you know?
Yeah, it's your responsibility to be the best you can be for them. He's, Stephen Ranella is a fellow who owns Meat Eater. They're the biggest company. They're a conglomerate. They
own all of hunting media, basically. And
they actually should be done for anti-competitive market share.
Every good company they just buy.
And he's like, to me, he's a really unsung philosopher, intelligent person. He just comes out with things where you're like, oh, that's so interesting. He talks a lot about the difference between raising boys and girls, you know?
Okay.
And then I think about it as well in regards to men and women as adults, and how different people are, and how different men and women are in terms of psychology. You know, there was... I think it might have been Chris Williamson a few months ago was talking about when men are getting, the amount of men who kill themselves even though they're getting therapy compared to women is drastically different.
That's terrifying.
And I always think, like, you know, we were talking about cognitive behavior therapy yesterday and how, like, it can be effective for some people, but like a lot of cognitive behavior therapy is acknowledgement that thought is okay or whatever. And some is very useful in sports science, and none of us is getting it before anyone's wondering. But it is an interesting topic, you know, in regards to controlling your mind or whatever, or outcomes. But and there's obviously some very good people there, but sometimes for lads, like Steve Ranella was talking about taking his daughter out hunting versus his son out hunting, and if his son was out hunting and they're sitting in a blind for ducks, or they're sitting in wet grass or rushes, or sitting in a really cold box, and the daughter would be like, "I'm cold and wet," and he's like, "Oh man, fuck, should we be even out there? Let's go home."
Yeah.
But he's like, his son is there and he's like, "Dad, my shoes are wet," and he's like, "Shh."
Yeah.
Shut up. Whereas I think, like, for men, I do think in some circumstances, and there is some changing in this, is that, like, sometimes for men it needs to be shut the fuck up, you know?
100%.
Stop, get over it, like.
I am so glad for those aspects of my child life.
Yeah.
My childhood, where whatever we were doing, I might have fallen into the river and we're just going to keep fishing, or I might be bait and I'm sleeping on the deck of a boat. I am absolutely #blessed that those things happen to me.
Yeah.
Because now there's so many times where I've been with other people in circumstances that mightn't be great, or that might be really stressful, or that might be like very similar where environmentally things aren't great and you just have to kind of get on with it, or completely different circumstances where it's just really high stress levels.
Yeah.
And I'm so much better able to deal with that than most other people, or other people I've been in those situations with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God that my mother and father and the people they got me to hang out with, like other adults around, just had that attitude of like, no, you just have to get on with this.
Our parents' generation is great for that, actually. And our older siblings' generation.
I remember being brought up mountain when I was like 11 or 12. So my mother jokingly said, like, when Dad brought us to get new mountain boots the week before, she should have known that the fact that he was doing this, it would already have been too difficult to climb, you know?
Yes.
And I remember getting to the top of the first plateau.
Did you cry?
And literally like crying, like lying on a rock, being like, you have to call mountain rescue. Like, I cannot go on. It was literally like hand over hand, just climbing up here.
Yeah.
Destroyed by the time I got to the top. And they're still, you're like 2 hours into a 6-hour climb if everything goes great. But now I look back on that and I'm like, thank God that happened.
We were talking to one of our good friends the other night about influencers using their kids and their family and YouTube and stuff. And I was saying, I think it's terrible. But then he was like, weren't you shouted at for spilling calf nuts when you were younger?
Yeah.
Because we grew up farming, and I was like, oh my God, you're, yeah, it's like growing up being really wealthy and being like, oh no, your trauma is your parents putting you on YouTube and your desk, you're being shouted at because you didn't stop a charging bull, you know? That is
standing in a gap in a field. I thought was one of the funniest ones in that conversation.
That is, yeah. When you put things in perspective like that, you know, it is very lucky. I think our generation was a little bit of a decline, and I think the generation below is a little bit different. But see, I wouldn't judge them too harshly because I didn't grow up with the 18-year-olds now. I didn't grow up as a child with them, so I have no idea what things are like for them growing up. You know, like you see a lot of people in the trades say they find it very hard to find apprentices and keep them if they do want to do that, but. It is, I wouldn't really be judging anyone too fast. I wouldn't be like, oh, they're super lazy like Gen Z or whatever. I have no idea what it was like. We're lucky we grew up in this stage. I would consider that, but it is, I wouldn't be quick to judge anyone. I've no idea what it was like for them. I've no idea what it would be like to have Facebook and Instagram and stuff in your teenager or when you're preteen, you know.
And how that would mentally affect you.
I think we had social media. Some people use Bebo when we were like 14, but social media wasn't a thing until we were just on the cusp of, I think it was just 17, which is a great age to start.
Yeah.
If later, if anything, would be better.
Pretty much perfect.
Yeah.
Like, that was ideal. You still got all the advantages of, like...
instant messaging.
Yeah. And being able to, like, see people from different friend groups who are kind of similar to you. And, like, you have that advantage of an actual Facebook, you know. Mm-hmm. But it's funny. I was always anti-social media forever. Since it came out, I've just been like, oh, I really don't like that. Obviously, I'm heavily enthralled in social media now, because we put up YouTube videos, even Instagram, we've all that stuff going on. To be fair, you handle a lot of that, but social media has always been something I've kind of erred away from. But now I'm at the point where I feel like it's just kind of useful. I
do find I use it way less outside of work now. So like we post, I think like 28 reels a week.
Jeez almighty.
21 TikToks. Like I don't even have TikTok on my phone. I don't really look at Instagram that much. I'll post stories that time or my training sessions. Like I don't have TikTok.
I purposely don't have TikTok on my phone. I remember I got it during like COVID, and I was like, one day there's 6 hours went, and I was like, oh, I clearly cannot have this.
Like I schedule all the posts now. We schedule all the videos, schedule all the Instagrams, which is great. Scheduling wasn't on Instagram up until recently.
Okay.
Which has made it much handier. So you just schedule it and not have to look at it. And it definitely, in some ways, it's actually good because outside of work, I just don't really want to look at things.
Yeah.
Like basically most days are come home from work, play with the boy, feed him, collect him, put him to bed or help put him to bed, and then go training and then just go to bed, you know.
Yeah.
I've been on a streak actually. I was talking about this about going to bed ASAP recently.
Yes.
So we're averaging like 8.5 to 9 hours sleep a lot of nights now. Since we came back from our training camp in Portugal, I was like, no, you know what? You've drifted into just going to bed at like 11:30 or 11:45 or 12 some nights.
Yeah.
You fool yourself as a parent is one of the things here, like your like personal time, you know, doing stupid shit.
Yeah.
But you actually don't need that. What you do need is 8 to 9 hours sleep.
Oh, 100%.
Far more productive.
You're just robbing happiness from tomorrow.
You don't, no, but if you do it long enough, you don't have any happiness to rob. Because you've missed so much sleep, you know. So I've been on an absolute streak now where I'm going to bed late one night. So the least amount of sleep I'll ever get now is 7.5. But
Jesus,
like last night I got 9 hours sleep. I was a bit asleep before 11, and I didn't wake up till like 8. So
I'd say my sleep hasn't been worse than what it is now.
You do have a thermometerless event, like you have to all hands on deck.
Yeah,
you're under pressure.
Big effort.
Yeah,
but it's the quality of sleep just makes the next day so much better. So like last weekend, obviously, just all day, every day, 18 hours each, all Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just trying to get a big job in the house done. And I was literally in the house on Saturday night, and I'd been on the phone to my missus being like, yeah, I'll gotta come home soon, moving down like Kango hammers and consaws from the attic, because we were taking down a big chimney stack in these buckets, and I'm like crawling along the attic, like kind of, is that?
Bear crawling? I don't know. Prone.
What's the like
prone
hopscotch? No, frog hop.
Yeah.
So basically, like put one out in front, then bring the other one over, then jump over those. But obviously, once you get to a certain point of tiredness, you're just not really concentrating.
Yes.
So I'm concentrating really hard on keeping the 50 kilo buckets of tools on the rafters. forgetting that the 100-kilo thing that's moving the tools should probably be on the rafters too, and just fell clean down through the ceiling.
You're so lucky.
So lucky, yeah. So lucky my arse is big enough not to fit through the rafters.
I know 3 farmers who've fallen through roof sheds, and 2 of them died.
Really?
Yeah, one of them had a stroke when he fell through.
Yeah.
So
there's a neighbour of ours at home actually who fell off a ladder in a shed like that, and had a stroke last year.
I know someone who fell off a ladder farming a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
They're in a coma for a bit. They're okay now, but I know a neighbour of ours fell through a shed. Was on the roof, had a stroke from the fall, I would assume, or had I would imagine it was from that. And then
yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about as well with the sleep thing, I used to be really good for sleep up until a few months ago.
I noticed I'd get WhatsApps off you late at night, and I'm like, why is he not asleep?
You just drift off away for it a little bit, but a lot of things like dementia, Parkinson's, heart disease starts 30, 40 years earlier than you would think, and sleep and dementia is a big thing. Now, really interestingly, dementia isn't really inheritable. Do you know that? There's a very, 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 very low genetic inheritability of most forms of dementia, like probably less than 5%.
Okay.
So most of dementia is lifestyle.
Okay.
And they're pretty sure. So none of the dementia medications work, basically.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So the plaque in the brain is really interesting, and lots of companies. The company I used to work for went down the funnel of targeting that plaque in the brain.
Yeah.
But there's actually plaque in healthy brains, perfectly healthy brains. So it's really it's a terrible disease, as many people know. But the company I worked for at the time, remember you get those emails site-wide from the global thing, like, and wasted, got to like phase 2 trials or something. So phase 1 of 3, they'd wasted like hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
But they're pretty sure now it's like a metabolic disease in the brain. So basically, like, some people have termed it diabetes of the brain.
Yes.
In fairness to Peter Attia, he was talking about this like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
He was talking whatever I don't like about his training methodology, but he's not a trainer, he's not a coach.
No.
I do really like his lifestyle factors, and he was saying metabolic health is probably a huge thing for dementia a long time ago, and he was thinking that like metabolic health is one of the biggest things,
Yeah.
But they reckon it's basically just not being healthy.
Yeah.
So, sleep was a big thing for a long time, but that probably, I don't know if that's an epidemiological factor. Like, do healthier people sleep more? Probably.
Yeah.
So, like, is sleep the factor? Probably as well, though.
Yeah.
Like, what impacts which first?
I was about to say, which is the first in those lines, or is it just everything is additive?
Yeah.
Like, I know after when I took my break from rugby, which ended up just being stopping playing rugby, went eating mostly paleo, but almost no carbs in that. And obviously my brain was recovering during that time, so it's a massively skewed thing.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes a massive difference to your cognitive abilities. It did for me then.
Concussions.
No, like more paleo.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, made a massive difference. Now, this is like saying I did bicep training while my broken arm got better, and that bicep training helped my broken arm. But it definitely makes a massive difference to like neural or cognitive clarity.
Do you know what's really interesting? Actually, I talked about bloods before, so it's not that personal. But I got recent bloods done, and they're probably the worst set of bloods I've ever had. So normally my bloods are like tip top, but I've been cutting a lot of weight, and certain markers have improved. Like lipids are very good, depending on what your opinion on lipids are and what is good. Metabolic health in terms of glucose is always really well, like fasting blood glucose, hemoglobin A1C, but some inflammatory markers are like way up, way higher than they've ever been. And it's most likely the stress of cutting weight is the only factor. Like, I suppose I'm cleaner eating than ever, but it's that's an interesting part of that, It's just a prolonged stress. But I'm cutting for several months, and like it's going really well, but it is most of the time when you cut weight and you lose fat mass, your biomarkers almost always improve. But these ones that have never been bad before...
You're also cutting like 40 kilos.
Yeah, like it's from morbidly obese.
Like you're coming from 138 kilos down to 98.
Actually, Blaine had a thing where he's saying you can't call yourself jacked unless you're in the BMI of obese for your body weight.
And have abs.
Yeah, and have abs. That's fair.
I think that's very fair.
He can say he's jacked.
He's definitely very jacked.
So to be honest, I thought I'd be done by now.
Done cutting?
bringing back around to the start of what we just talked about, the start of the podcast.
Yeah, you thought you'd be ripped.
Well, like, normally when I want to be ripped, it's I'm not joking you, it's like an 8-week endeavor.
Yeah.
I've done it multiple times.
Yeah.
Like, the year before last, the start of just 2023, when I was going into the big training block, I was like 98 kilos, as lean as I've ever been.
Yeah.
Like, still pretty jacked. And it took like 2 or 3 months to get there.
Yeah.
It was, what's really messed me up, and I'll make a longer video about it when I feel like I'm done, but being in good shape while doing a hybrid system is so fucking hard. Your body does not want to lose a lot of weight.
I think that's just the systematic stress that comes along with all of that different modality training.
That's exactly what it is, but I'd never appreciate it. Anytime I wanted to be lean and see abs, like, there's points where I've had ab veins and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just so easy because I was just doing weightlifting. Or when I was just doing jiu-jitsu, it was easier than ever.
Jiu-jitsu's the best thing in the world for losing weight.
Jiu-jitsu 5 times a week.
Yeah.
So about 10 hours of that. I was eating like 250 grams of carbs.
Yeah.
Like, I'll see if I'm editing this, I'll pop up a picture and I'll show you how lean I was. And I'm not talking shit. Like, it was shredded.
Yes.
After a water cut, I haven't been that lean since I was 17, you know.
Yeah.
But I did never bother me because I was just like, oh yeah, it's easy to get lean when you want it. This has actually given me a lot more of an appreciation for people in general for getting lean as well.
Yes.
But in particular, when you're trying to jiu-jitsu, trying to be strong, trying to snatch, trying to keep or build muscle mass in the upper body. What else am I doing? Sprinting, lots of steady state cardio, foddering, working.
Yeah.
It's
Staying
actually
in touch with your squat.
Oh yeah.
Like,
that's actually been going really well. I thought that'd be worse with the weight cut, but it's actually currently 185 grams of carb for most of the week.
Currently 185 kilos.
Hey. So it is. It's really interesting how much harder. Like, were I to stop most of those things, it'd be a lot faster. You know.
What I will say is the squatting and running was phenomenal for getting in good shape.
Yes, it's pretty unidirectional.
Yeah, and it was like, because you do enough volume with the running where you're just burning a lot of calories, and then you hold on to a pretty good amount of muscle mass. Mm-hmm. Like, generally speaking, pretty good amount of muscle mass everywhere from the squatting. Like, it is if you were to do any model of hybrid that's not bodybuilding plus something else, I think squatting and running is pretty good for physique.
Program coming soon. But it was Alex Keegles. I'm still working with him.
Yeah.
Nearly like 14 months now, a long time. He's a great guy to have on my side. But he said this might be happening with the training. He said he sees a lot with CrossFitters. The one thing he did say, he said he finds with multi or hybrid athletes, he said if they find it really hard to get lean. So the weight on the scales is going down appropriately, but the physique changes weren't happening. So he's employed some tricks, which is great. But he said he sees a lot with CrossFitters who are trying to get leaner. He said their output will be massive, like pro CrossFitters, elite CrossFitters, ball of PDs, and they'll find it very hard to get lean because of the multi-directional nature of the training. He did say, though, that once they get lean, he said they stay really lean a lot of the time. And it becomes the new normal. But he said getting to that leaner stage, he said, if you were just a physique athlete, again, and bring it back to what we were just talking about, if you just chase physique, you can look pretty good if you know what you're doing and you've decent genetics.
100%.
But as soon as you throw anything else into the mix, and you look at those rugby players who, on the surface, eat really clean, may or may not take PDs, are definitely genetic freaks because they're on the international rugby teams, and no matter what you're doing,
if you're playing pro sport, you're genetically freakish.
Like, if you're on Leinster there, the talent mill they're churning out, as much as it pains me to say it, they are some of the best rugby players in the world. And like, the people they're cutting, the people they get rid of, are A teams for most rugby teams in the world. Like,
absolutely,
they're on the panel. Like, and these are people who've no careers now because they just weren't good enough. And we work with a lot of, more than any other sport, professional rugby players. Yeah, definitely. Probably professional martial artists, but outside of that, like, you see, it's really hard to be in that shape. It's something it's definitely the biggest thing I've learned about training in the last 10 years, I'd say. Yes. No, not 10 years, 7 years, 5 years.
Just how crazy it is when there's so much different stuff going on.
And it shows you genetic freaks are genetic freaks.
Yeah. I think as well, there's probably a valuable lesson on the other side of that of why is your body wanting to hold on to that bit of extra fat?
Because my body's disgusting as it is currently, you know?
Well, no, I think you can learn something that, like, as a rugby player or as somebody who's trying to do a bit of lifting and a bit of jiu-jitsu and sprinting and all that, you probably should have a bit more fat. Like, you're probably going to be better off with a bit more fat. Obviously, you want to be ripped because you're going to do the photo shoot later on this year.
in my thongs.
But, like, there's probably a reason you're holding on to that. Like, there's no physiological advantage to you being really lean.
No.
It's purely this.
Well,
it's different if you're, like, sprinting or running.
Yeah,
and moving that fat around costs you something.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're not, like, surviving, you're going to be better off with some layer, like 16% body fat.
You know the statue of David?
Yeah.
Like, so people make the argument that we wouldn't have been that muscular before, even though it seems like it would have been. Mm-hmm. But someone like David was there, like.
Yeah, it's funny because, so, there's I've read a few things on this, right?
Right.
Because I used to love art when I was, like, in school in my early 20s, which is so nerdy. But I love it, right? So there's a normal thing there's an observed function of that style of art where a certain amount of inflation above normal happened, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously not in the penile department, but normally they would manipulate figures in paintings or statues to be slightly more godlike. But even if you look at something like the statue of David, if that's a slight increase, there is people walking around looking very similar to that, which blows your mind.
Yeah, that didn't come from nowhere.
Beans and dust.
Yeah, and honey.
Yeah,
like one of the Stoics was a wrestler, and I think it wasn't Socrates, it wasn't Marcus Aurelius, it might have been Aristotle. Was a wrestler, was a Greco-Roman wrestler. So apparently he had, for the time, an amazing physique or whatever, you know. But it is, someone had to be walking around looking like that.
Yeah. Right. Thanks very much for tuning in. I feel like this was a much more kind of serious shit talk than talking about pirates and the apocalypse.
It's wherever the wind takes us, really.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you all again soon.